Anomaly.
I am an anomaly.
Anomaly.
I am an anomaly.
I am an anomaly.
Anomaly.
An
anomaly.
Anomaly. Something that deviates from what is standard, normal, or expected. An oddity, peculiarity, irregularity, inconsistency, incongruity, a rarity.
Hi, welcome to the Anomaly podcast. This is Jen, and I am doing a solo mini-skirt all about Star Trek books. Specifically the ones I just finished while fighting the Boolean brainpox, which I dubbed the flu in my last episode with Angela. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't yet. You could do that through Apple iTunes, through Stitcher, through iHeartRadio, YouTube. We're almost everywhere. So I found this really cool Tumblr page, psiwaves.tumblr.com. That's psiwaves.tumblr.com. And this particular blog is all about Captain Jean-Luc Picard and Dr. Beverly Crusher from Star Trek The Next Generation. And it's entitled TNG Novels, Where to Begin. If I could find this person's name, I would mention them and credit them appropriately. Bravo, thank you to the person who wrote this. Go check it out if you are into TNG novels. This person did a lot of footwork and exploring which books to start with if you want to read about the relationship of Picard and Crusher. There are some books in the Star Trek universe that explore that relationship. She even writes down which ones that she likes the best. I will share some of her findings with you as well as my own. I took their advice and I started with Death in Winter by Michael Jan Friedman. Now, I read this book before, but it had been a while. This is the synopsis found on Amazon.com for the book Death in Winter. Long before Jean-Luc Picard took command of the legendary Star Trek Enterprise, he fell deeply and hopelessly in love with Dr. Beverly Crusher. Though for one reason or another, Picard never acted on his feelings. Lame. He found a measure of contentment as Beverly's close friend, colleague, and daily breakfast partner. I love those episodes. But when Dr. Crusher leaves her position on the Enterprise to become the chief medical officer of Starfleet, the brightest light in Picard's life is taken from him. And he has hardly resigned himself to this loss when he learns that Beverly has been declared missing in action on a distant planet and presumed dead. Dum dum dum! Kavratas is a bleak, frozen world on the far side of the Romulan neutral zone, where the Federation has become the plague-ravaged natives' only real hope of survival and freedom. Starfleet has no recourse but to send in another team to try to save the Kavrata, and Picard is the natural choice. Critical to the success of his mission are two colleagues who served under him when he commanded the starship Stargazer. Pug Joseph, a man with a past to live down, and Dr. Carter Greyhorse, who served time for attempted murder, as well as a Romulan who left his people years earlier and never expected to return. Together, they follow the trail of Beverly Crusher to Kavratas, determined to succeed where the Doctor failed. On the Romulan homeworld, meanwhile, the political vacuum created by the demise of Praetor Shinzon has been filled by his staunchest supporter, Senator Talara. But there are those who oppose her, including Commander Denatra and the warbird fleets under her command because of the way Talara has mishandled rebellions on the Empire's subject worlds. And one rebellion in particular, the movement for self-determination on frigid Kavratas, the place where Beverly went. So begins the desperate struggle, not only for the freedom of the long-oppressed Kavrata, but also for the soul of the Romulan Empire. Before it's over, destinies will be forged and shattered. The Empire will be shaken to its ancient foundations, and Jean-Luc Picard's life will be changed forever. Sorry, I tried to read that with a little more drama, but my voice is still not cooperating. It's been almost a month and a half, and I've still got the crud. You should read this book. It's good. It's a quick read, I think. I probably read it in a week. Of course, I was sick, so I didn't have much more to do than just lay there and rest, but it's a good book. The only thing that I wasn't really interested in was the whole Romulan thing. Blah, 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 politics, blah, 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 Romulans. I just wanted them to get on with the whole Picard Crusher thing. It was mostly Crusher doing her thing, Picard doing his thing. They both have separate missions, and you only get to see them together at the end. We'll talk more about it in a minute, but so now you know. I probably give it a out of 4 stars. I would give it a solid 3. Yeah, 3 stars. It's exceedingly difficult to figure out what the chronology of these books are. Why is it so hard to create a page that outlines the order the books should be read in? I mean, Star Wars has accomplished this. Why can't Star Trek do that? Can anyone listening to this show tell me what the deal is? And if I have missed something, is there some secret link that I should click on that will take me to a golden vault of awesomeness that will tell me all of the books in order? Why is it hard? Anyway, I've got opinions on the matter. It's just confusing sometimes. So on to the book. This is going to be spoilery. So if you haven't read it, you can find it on Amazon in paperback form and in Kindle form. And I don't really know if let me look. I don't think it's available on Audible. Let's see. Death in Winter. Let's see if they have it. No, there are a crap ton of Star Wars books, but not very many Star Trek books on Audible. They need to do something about that. I love them both equally, and I just want to see Star Trek get a little more love. Memory Beta. Click on that. This has got a lot of info in it. I'm going to do this Star Wars Stacks style. If you haven't listened to the Star Wars Stacks podcast, that's the podcast that I do with my friends Chris and Joe. What we basically do is we give a non-spoiler review, which I just did for this book, and then we launch into all spoilers. And Joe does a lot of work by summarizing the book himself. We don't go to Wikipedia. He writes the whole thing. I ain't got time for that. So I'm going to summarize it using Memory Beta, and then I will interject my thoughts. The thing about this book is that it jumps around a little bit in time, and then it gets to the story, the meat of the story. So it starts off at Jack and Beverly's wedding, and some Romulan agent named Mantis is posing as a waiter, and he's going around collecting DNA samples from several captains, including Walker Keel and Jean-Luc Picard. And he's going to send that DNA back to his praetor, who has wicked plans to clone the captains and then take over the Federation. The book shifts to the past when Beverly is Beverly Howard and not Beverly Crusher, and she's a part of a rescue operation on a colony. She's caring for a group of Kavrata, who are the alien race in this book series that she goes and rescues, that escaped Romulan space in hopes of reaching the Federation and getting them to help them with a cure for a disease called the blood fire. Unfortunately, all the Kavrata died within days of their arrival on the colony, and before noon the same day, the first case of the blood fire was contracted by a colonist, Beverly's grandmother, Felicia Howard, which we see in Sub Rosa. She, comes up from the dead out of the casket. That was a really funny episode, and if you want to hear more about that one in particular, check out our Worst of Trek episode archive, where you can see the Sub Rosa or hear the Sub Rosa review that we did. She supplemented the medications available on the colony with tubers and herbs from her garden until the medicines were gone, and the garden remedies were all that were left. Before the Federation medical teams could arrive, about a week and a half later, way to go, Starfleet, the disease had ravaged the colony. Shift to Romulus. This, I think, takes place right after Nemesis, which was not my favorite Star Trek movie, and I don't think it was a lot of people's favorite, for obvious reasons, but I can't remember who these people are. I think I remember Donatra and maybe Admiral Bragg. Talara, they all sound familiar. If you want to write in and tell me who these people are so I don't have to watch the movie again, that would be awesome. So, Praetor Talara finds her rule on the Romulan Star Empire threatened by Admiral Bragg. She determines that assassination is not an acceptable means of eliminating him, as it would turn him into a martyr. Tamalak finds himself as the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Defense Force and has secured the loyalty of nearly all the Warburg commanders under his command. Dinatra, who is loyal to Admiral Bragg, has the loyalty of the remainder of the fleet. Later, it is revealed that Dinatra and Bragg have a years-long impassioned love affair, which they've kept hidden for obvious political and occupational reasons. Eberron, a Romulan's arms dealer, hires Manthus to spy on and discredit Sella, whom he sees as his chief rival as the Praetor's advisor. Yep, Sella is back. She is the half-human, half-Romulan daughter of Romulan General Volskar and Lieutenant Natasha Yar. Shift to the planet Kavratas, and Beverly Crusher undertakes a covert mission to provide a cure for the blood fire in coordination with an underground movement. And Sella obtains her knowledge of the operation and takes Beverly into custody. Now, one of the coolest things about Beverly's mission is that she has this holographic disguise that makes her look big and giant and fuzzy, like the aliens on this planet, which one thing I like about the books that the television series just didn't have the budget for is all the different types of aliens. They're not just humanoids with bumps on their heads. They're really interesting and not at all recognizable at times as humanoid. So this is an interesting disguise that she has that's a holographic one that envelops her, and I think it even distorts her voice. Okay, so she's taken into custody by Sella, Queen Biatch of the Romulan Empire. After finding herself alive but injured and imprisoned by Sella, Dr. Crusher determines that if additional personnel from the Federation are sent, their primary mission would be to cure the blood fire. She remembers her work with Carter Greyhorse at Starfleet Medical years earlier and his contributions to finding a cure for the blood fire, and reasons he would be the next logical choice to send to cure the plague, but that because of his years of incarceration, he would need to be accompanied by someone who understood the Romulans and could control Dr. Greyhorse, Captain Jean-Luc Picard. She realizes that she will have to get herself away from Sella and off Kavratas if she is to avoid certain death. It's time to woman up and take care of this situation herself. Okay, so shift to the USS Enterprise. Picard is overseeing the repairs to his ship after the events of Nemesis, as well as transfers of several key personnel. He finds the advisor and confidant he misses most as Beverly Crusher. He finds himself unable to choose a new chief medical officer to replace her, an admission that she had truly moved on without him, and he delegates the responsibilities to Commander Worf. Picard is notified by Admiral Edrich that Beverly has been declared missing and presumed dead after not making contact for 3 days during a covert mission in the Romulan Star Empire. The Federation is still interested in providing a cure to the Kavratans, not only for humanitarian reasons, but for political reasons as well. They want to screw things up for the Romulans. The Admiral orders Captain Picard to complete her mission with the assistance of former crewmates Carter Greyhorse and Pug Joseph, and a Romulan defector named Declan. On the Enterprise, Picard argues that Beverly is not dead and secures permission to find her and return with her upon completion of the mission. Someone tell me where I've read about Carter Greyhorse. Is it a TNG episode I'm remembering? Is it a book? Sometimes they blend together for me. I know he was Looney Tunes and he tried to kill Picard, but I don't know if I gleaned that information from this book or another one or an episode. Pug Joseph sounds familiar. He was an alcoholic. And I do remember being kind of confused how that could happen because I didn't think you could get drunk on synthahol. And that was all that Starfleet offered, unless he just was sneaking some Andorian ale every once in a while. I do remember the Romulan defector. There's an episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation, in which they help him escape, and they're not really sure if he's a good guy or bad guy. Let me see, am I confusing that too? He made use of the short-lived Underground Railroad, which ferried defectors into Federation space. It doesn't say what episode. So again, I have a lapse in memory as to where I've heard this guy's name before. And if you are a Star Trek fan and you happen to know I would love for you to write in and fill me in. Okay, so Kavratis. Mantis, I want to call him Mantis, like on Guardians of the Galaxy. Mantis assists Dr. Crusher in escaping from Sella's prison and takes her into an abandoned government hall where he intends to kill her to hasten his rise to power with the Praetor and Sella's subsequent demise. Dr. Crusher points out to Mantis that he's also contracted the Bloodfire and that killing her also eliminates a cure for himself. And of course, he sees the logic and doesn't kill her. But that's a really stressful scene where she's really in a bad way and she's freezing to death. He doesn't put a coat on her or anything. He bashes her in the head and leaves her there inside this abandoned government hall. There's no heat and she's locked in and she's freezing to death. Awesome. Dr. Greyhorse begins working on a cure for the Bloodfire, while Captain Picard arranges with the rebel leader, Hanaphagus, for the distribution of the cure. During the remainder of the mission, Picard is withdrawn, causing both Pug Joseph and Declan concern regarding his agonized state. He's trying not to pressure Greyhorse over finding a cure, but his rescue of Beverly, remember, hinges on the completion of their primary mission, which is to cure the plague. And Greyhorse is a very fragile man, and Picard doesn't want to push him and make him crack because the dude has to do his job too. But Picard is more and more concerned that Beverly is what her situation is if she's alive. Currently, she's freezing to death in an abandoned government hall. Joseph realizes that Picard's motivation is personal, not just professional. Mantis makes arrangements to take Dr. Crusher back to Romulus to develop a cure for the Romulans instead. Beverly is left alone in the frozen government hall, while Mantis organizes supplies and transportation to Romulus. He bashed her in the head and he left her there unconscious. It talks about how the floor is frozen and her face is like stuck to the floor. I can just imagine how uncomfortable that was. She continues her efforts to escape on her own, working to free herself from Mantis's bounds. She begins contemplating her life up to that point, the happiness she'd felt during her marriage to Jack, and how she'd filled her days for years after his death with distractions from her daily grief. Lastly, how the time she shared with Jean-Luc was what she'd treasured most about the recent years, because of the lack of pretense between them. I'm sure Wesley was in there somewhere. She was going to miss him too. I would miss him if he was my son. Picard assembles his team and travels to Kavratis. Disguised as Barolian traders, the team makes contact with Phaeton, who quickly betrays them to Sella. This Phaeton guy is the one who helped Declan sneak into the Federation when he defected, and Declan trusts him quite a bit. But this dude has obviously changed because there's no longer an underground railroad, and he's lost all hope of ever changing the Empire. He turns coat and reports them to Sella, who is after them now. Captain Picard suspects Phaeton's deception, and the team flees just before Sella and her team can capture them into the Kavratan catacombs where the underground congregates. Okay, this is where Greyhorse is working on the cure, down in the dark, dank, dungeony area of Kavratis. After making contact with the rebel leaders, the team learns that Sella has taken Dr. Crusher prisoner. Okay, that's old news because now Mantis has her, but they don't know that. Back on Romulus, blah, 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 yada, 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 political crap. I'm sure some people find this interesting, but I was sick and I was only wanting to read about Picard and Crusher because Star Trek The Next Generation is like chicken noodle soup. I put it on and it makes me feel better. And I just wanted to read happy things about Picard and Crusher, but instead I get stuck with the infighting on Romulus. And I was like, blah, 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 backstabbing, blah, 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 sexy times. Back on Romulus, Talara privately acknowledges that she is losing control of the outer worlds, and that should Sella fail in her task to capture and kill the Federation agents assisting the rebels on Kavratis, she will also have to deal with Bragg sooner rather than later. Talara also learns from Eberron's aunt, Clyrana, who sounds very tyrannical, that he has betrayed her trust. Talara orders him executed in public as a punishment for his treachery. Upon learning of Eberron's death, Bragg makes preparations to seize power from Talara. I think Eberron decides to take poison or something. It was very Greek of him. Kavratis. The The bloodfire maturates and begins infecting the Romulans on the planet in addition to the Kavratans. Manthus returns to the government hall to find Dr. Crusher weakened from cold and hunger, incoherent and mumbling, "Duh, dude, why is this a shock?" He provides her with food and water, and she falls asleep. Manthus' transport back to Romulus arrives at Kavratus. He escorts Beverly to the transport site at Disruptor Point. Once in the city again, Beverly spots one of the rebels she met when she first arrived on the planet and escapes her captor while revealing herself in broad daylight. The rebels reach her first and guide her to a safe house. After ensuring her safety, the rebels send word to Hanaphagus that Beverly is safe. That's the leader of the rebels, I think. He relays the message to Picard, who is visibly relieved. While Picard has delivered the news of Beverly's fate to Peter Joseph, Carter Greyhorse announces that he has finished the cure and is ready to start delivering it to the Kavratans. Okay, back on Romulus. Bragg rallies his supporters in Victory Square, much to the dismay of Talara, who gives the order to destroy Bragg and his followers. Consequently, Dinatra and Tamalok muster their forces and begin their battle against each other. Talara's Centurions close in on Victory Square and Bragg's followers, and Bragg surrenders to Talara. Talara has Bragg executed following his right to statement, in which he professes his love to Dinatra. It's very tragic, very sad. Talara notes that even in failure, Sella was still loyal to her, and while she will leave Sella on Kavratus until she is needed again, Talara knows who she can trust. Okay, we're nearing the end, the home stretch, back on Kavratus. Upon completing distribution of the vaccine for the Bloodfire, Picard moves towards his second objective on his mission, Beverly Crusher's safe return to the Federation. Having arranged through Hanaphagus and the other members of the Underground to meet Beverly at the transport site, Picard and his team arrive early, as he is eager to see her. However, Sella and her Centurions appear, ruining everything. One of the rebels ratted him out. The Romulans had his family. He had to, or they were going to all die. A firefight breaks out between the two groups, and Picard finds himself at the business end of Sella's disruptor. He sees another rebel attack Sella and realizes an instant later that rebel had long red hair. Wah! Who knew Crusher was a badass? Wah, 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 wah! Sella and Beverly clash, and as Beverly knocks Sella unconscious, Manthus enters the throng, intent on recapturing Beverly. Declan fights Manthus, resulting in his death. Wah, wah, wah. He's repaying Starfleet for what he feels was a gift, I guess, to be able to escape the Empire. So he's paying Starfleet back by saving Beverly. And he's achieving some absolution or some forgiveness, I guess, for having relied on his friend who ratted them out to Sella. He was really adamant that they should trust that guy. And Picard was right. The guy was a rat. And Declan never believed him. He was kind of pouty pants about it, like for most of the time in the catacombs. And so he finally comes to the realization that Picard was always right. And so he's paying every win back by attacking Manthus, but he dies, which is sad. Having dispatched another Centurion, Jean-Luc obtains a disruptor and continues his quest to find Beverly. He finds her at Manthus's disruptor point, at which point he kills Manthus. At the conclusion of the fight, Picard embraces Beverly and shares his genuine feelings for her, convinced that her feelings are mutual. Beverly, however, appears stunned and begins surveying the battlefield and the other former combatants when Peter Joseph signals their beam-up. This was a little bait and switch that Michael Jan Friedman did here, where he gave us this moment where we thought for sure the two of them would kiss, and the inner fangirl inside of me who always wanted them to be together would finally be satisfied that they would be a couple at long last. Beverly interacts with everyone as though nothing happened, but says nothing more to Picard, which I think is really crappy of her. He senses that he has damaged the relationship between them and finds himself relieved of the discomfort when she and Carter Greyhorse meet with further transportation to a starbase for debriefing. He and Peter Joseph return to Earth. USS Enterprise. Having returned to his ship, Picard is still distressed. Do you blame him? I mean, really? He spent all that time there trying to hurry up and cure a whole planet so that he could rescue the love of his life. He pours his heart out to her, and she's like, oh. Picard spends the next 3 days in his quarters before returning to duty. On Picard's first day back on duty, he has entered his ready room when Worf notifies him that the new chief medical officer has arrived and is ready to report in. If you'll recall, Picard left all the decision-making for the refit and restaffing of the Enterprise, everything that he'd kind of left in the air, he left that to Worf to do. I think at this point, he thinks that Worf just found him a new CMO. Picard turns to the viewport, still unable to admit to himself that Beverly was gone from his life. His CMO enters the ready room quietly, and he, still turned towards the window, quickly welcomes the new CMO to his ship. Beverly responds that she requested the assignment, taking Picard back with her choice of words. They reunite. There aren't any other scenes of them really together as a couple. Okay, something I forgot to mention is that during all of this, Worf and Geordi are trying to figure out where Picard went. This is like the through line throughout the, book, where you have a little cut scene where Worf and Geordi are trying to work out where they're going and what's going on and how they're going to steal a shuttle and take it on this mission to help Picard rescue Beverly. But Admiral Janeway, she puts the kibosh on that. She's very understanding to them, but basically says, can it, guys? We got this. So, yeah, there's that. And then the other thing I forgot to say is that Sella's basically a screw-up in this book. I'm not really sure why the Praetor has any trust in her. She is loyal, but she's screwed up a lot. Like, she murdered some Kravratans and started some uprisings. There's like these hover vehicles that are illegal or they've been outlawed. I can't remember what the deal was with them, but she uses them to slaughter a street of Kavratan protesters. She's afraid that if she allows the Doctor to cure the Kavratans, that they would have less sway over them, I think. And then finally, this last scene I just told you about with Picard and Beverly. This is the payoff for the whole book, this short little scene. The only other scene with Beverly and Picard together occurs at the beginning of the book, and they're not even in the same room. They're talking to each other through communique or subspace message, and you feel very uncomfortable because she's giving him the cold shoulder. He wants her to come have dinner with him. She promised that she would. He misses her. It's because of this mission and she's preoccupied, but it makes him feel like she's avoiding him. Throughout the entire book, they're on separate missions and there's a lot of tension, and the buildup is for the end of the book where Picard and Beverly have their moment together. So if you're like me and just wanted that to be the whole book, then I'm going to read that scene for you right now so that you can just get the good part and skip the Romulan politics and the uprisings and the plague and all that stuff. I'm sure that's exciting to some people, but how nice would it be just to have a Picard and Beverly-centric book with nothing else going on that's all crazy? They can go to Risa together. How about a house in France in the Picard vineyard? And you can just get a scene, of them picking grapes or Beverly growing herbs, and maybe a retirement book. And they're not divorced. They're married. Everybody's happy. We didn't get that. We're not going to get that. So I'm just going to read the good part so that you can scratch that Beverly and Picard itch that you have had for decades and be happy. All right? So here it is. "Sir," said Worf, "the new chief medical officer has arrived." Picard was taken aback. Had Worf alerted him to the imminence of this person's arrival? Probably, and he had been so distracted he had failed to pay attention. "I'm not ready," he thought. That sounded like Sean Connery. Anyway, however, he would have to meet the fellow sooner or later. "Send him to my ready room." "You mean send her to your ready room?" Picard sighed. It would have to be a woman, wouldn't it? Yes, of course. Send her. Suddenly, he didn't feel comfortable behind his desk. He yielded to a need to get up, to stretch his legs, and wound up in front of the observation point. For once, there weren't any repair vehicles floating around. Just him and the stars. At least, for a little while. Then he heard a chime, and a chill ran down his spine. That rhymed. Come, he said, forcing certainty into his voice. But he kept his back to the door. After all, until he actually saw Beverly's replacement, he wouldn't have to acknowledge the fact that she was really gone. It was a bit rude, yes, and he had always prided himself on manners. But he couldn't help it. Funny, he thought. He had faced all sorts of enemies and nightmarish circumstances in the course of his Starfleet career, but he couldn't bring himself to face his new medical officer. Picard heard the whisper of the door as it opened, and then again as it closed. And by those signs, which cut him like knives, he knew that Beverly's replacement had entered the room. I apologize, he said, keeping his eyes on the stars as he gathered himself. I was tied up, or I would have greeted you in the transporter room. In any case, I am glad to have you aboard. You are obviously highly qualified, or you would not have been selected for this assignment. For the first time, he heard his new CMO speak. I requested this assignment, Captain. Had he heard only the words and not the voice, he might have marveled at the coincidence, because they were among the first words Beverly uttered when she came aboard the Enterprise D. But hearing the voice, he knew it was no coincidence, because the woman who had uttered the words the first time was the same woman who had uttered them a second ago. The captain turned from the observation port and saw Beverly Crusher standing before him, a sheepish smile, gosh, that's hard to say, pulling at the corners of her mouth. I don't understand, he said, stumbling over the words like a schoolboy. By way of response, she crossed the room and took him in her arms. Then she raised her perfect mouth to his and kissed him, long and passionately. Finally! Afterward, she said, I've been a fool, Jean-Luc. I was given a second chance at loving you and I almost threw it away. Can you forgive me? Picard smiled and brushed a lock of her hair from her face. Perhaps in time, but then we have plenty of that now, don't we? And he kissed her all over again. That was worth reading the whole entire book, full of crazy Kavrata aliens and the Romulan politics and backstabbing and political uprisings, crazy weird diseases and crazy doctors and drunken former officers and all of it was worth that very last scene right there. The next book, which I can't cover in this edition of Anomaly, we'll have to make it a part 2, which I'll start recording right away, and hopefully we'll have up for you right after this one. We will be covering another book, which is not in order, I don't think. Like I said, it's really hard to know the chronology of these books. But the title of that book is Q Squared by Peter David. Read that one and get it all digested, and then we will cover Q Squared in the next miniskirt book review from Anomaly. And then Angela and I will try to get back to doing another episode together very soon. She went to South by Southwest, which is a big event in Austin, a technology thing, arts festival, kind of all melted together. And hopefully she'll have some news for us when she comes back about what it was like to go. If you have any suggestions for a topic, please let us know. So far, my only suggestion did not come from a listener, but a friend of mine, Chris, who you all know from the Star Wars Stacks, but he downloaded Stage 9, which is a software that allows you to tour the USS Enterprise, NCC 1701D. And they have a software version for Mac and PC. And you can even interact with the environment, like launch torpedoes and stuff. So I was thinking it would be super cool to explore that tour. And it would be cool to have some sort of screen capture software going on. Maybe we can record it together, in the same room. But I don't know. It also allows for you to wear virtual reality headsets. I don't think we have any of that, but it would be cool to do this. We may have to wait a while we gather the technology to do this the right way, because I think it would be more fun to experience it in a video podcast. And then we would just obviously upload the audio to the feed as well and give you a link to the video so you can see what that looks like. In case we can't do that for our next episode because we can't gather the technology in time to do it because it costs money, let us know what you want us to cover next. I think the vast majority of you are Star Trek fans, and you seem to be enjoying everything we do Star Trek, but I don't want to bore the people who aren't Star Trek fans. So if you're getting tired of Star Trek and you want a break from Star Trek, tell me what to do next. We'd love to hear from you. You can write in at our email address, which is girlygeeks@gmail.com. That's girlygeeks with a Z @gmail.com. Or you can go to our website at anomalypodcast.com. That's ANOMALY podcast.com, and click on contact. And there's a contact field there that you can fill out and shoot us an email that way. You can also join our Facebook group, and you can ask us questions there or suggest topics there. We probably spend more time on our Facebook group than we do in any other social circle. You can find a link to it on our contact page at anomalypodcast.com. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't yet. You could do that through Apple iTunes, through Stitcher, through iHeartRadio, YouTube. We're almost everywhere, including Zune, which I didn't even know people still listen to, but apparently it's still out there. Google Play, all the places. And if you're not really sure, go to our website once again, click on subscribe and subscribe to podcasts. And you'll see a list of all the most prominent places we are located. Be sure you tell at least one geek that you think would like this show about Anomaly. That would help us out a lot. Well, I hope you enjoyed this very unconventional episode of Anomaly. If you like this kind of a book review format, please let me know and I will do more. Of course, we have Q Squared. I'll be doing that next. Read up. Thank you for listening. I'm Jen, and you've been listening to the Anomaly Podcast, where female and fandom converge.